DreAllDay.com.
Now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. This is the go-getter energy that moves you to make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. Putting all this together, you get the mindset, the method, the podcast known as Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day. Welcome to the show. Today's topic is how to work on your mental game. Now, the mental game is something that the whole Work on Your Game philosophy is based around the mental game. My book, Work on Your Game, the stuff that we talk about here on this podcast every day, even when we're talking about business topics or we're talking personal growth topics, it all comes back to the mental game, because I believe, my belief that is the center of everything that I talk about, my whole philosophy is that the mental game is what controls and opens up the physical game. So whatever resources you have, whether those resources be skills, money, talents, knowing other people, ideas, education, all of those resources that you have, they will either be opened up and expanded and made full use of, or they'll be locked away in some safe that you don't know the combination to, based on your ability to control, enhance, and utilize your mental game when it's most needed. So since I say the mental game is just as important as, if not more important than the physical resource game, you need to know where to begin when it comes to working on your mental game. So today I'm going to give you 3 strategies, principles to follow when it comes to working on and developing your mental game for whatever you do, whether you're an athlete, you're in the business world, you're working somewhere, or you're somewhere in between, you don't even know what the hell you're doing. Here's how you work on your mental game, because you're going to need it whether you're employed, underemployed, unemployed, fully employed, or retired. Let's get right into it. Point number 1, today's topic again is how to work on your mental game. And I should mention my book, The Mental Handbook. If you have not read that, you can get it as part of the Bulletproof Bundle at DreAllDay.com/BB, which stands for Bulletproof Bundle. That's 4 of my books on the mental game. That's 100 mental game best practices, the mental handbook, the mirror motivation, and the super you, all in one bundle, physically shipped to your doorstep, or get the digital if you prefer. Point number 1, here we go. Take times out to clear your mind and focus on the way you would be in the moment of your performance. So when I say the moment of your performance, what is it that you're doing? I mean, you're working on your game for a reason. All right, so I'm making an assumption here that if you're listening to a podcast called Work on Your Game, you're working on your game for some reason. There's somewhere that game is going to need to show, whether that's in a job interview, whether you're playing in the championship game of some athletic competition, whether you're doing a sales presentation, if you're giving a speech to 10 people or to 10,000 people, there's somewhere that you're going to need to perform and actually show the game that you've been working on. Again, the mental game, the physical game, the resource game, whatever it is, somewhere you got to show that game. So what you need to do on a consistent basis, this is working on your mental game, people. So this is not something that you do one time and you just do it and you're like, all right, I'm good. I did that one thing that Dre said on the podcast. Everything I talk about here on this show are things that you need to consider. How can I incorporate this into what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis? How can I incorporate this into being something that is consistent in my life? These are not one-offs, okay? Nothing that I talk about here is a one-off. These are things that you really need to think about. How does this apply to my life, my work, my sport, my career, and figure out how you can add it in, mix it in, replace something else that you've been doing with these things. So what you're doing here, this is point number 1. Take time out to clear your mind from whatever you've been thinking about in the moment and focus on how you would be mentally in the moment of performing, the moment of showing off your game, the moment of that job interview, the moment of that championship match that you're going to be competing in, the moment of that sales presentation, the moment of you just doing your job on a day-to-day basis. What type of mindset do you want to get into? You need to practice your mindset. And the way you practice your mindset, again, is clearing your mind of what you're doing right now and focus on how you're going to feel when you're doing the thing. If you're in sports, where do you want to be mentally during the game? If you're speaking in public, where do you want to be while you're giving that speech, while you're making that sale, while you're doing that interview? What state of mind do you want to exist in while you're in the act of doing the thing? Understand, people, that you need time practicing that frame of mind. And there's no better time to practice it than when you're actually physically practicing a skill or performance. So for example, if you're an athlete, when you're practicing your football game or your basketball game or your rodeo game or your equestrian game or your softball game or your baseball game, get yourself in the frame of mind as you would want to be during the game. Something Michael Jordan always said was that he always tried to make the games more challenging and harder on him. The practices rather, more challenging and harder on him than the actual games. And I would assume, I never asked Michael this, and I don't think I've heard him say it, but I would assume that meant he approached practice with the same mindset that he would want to approach a game with. So he didn't look at practice like this is only practice, or there's no one else in the gym but us on the team, or this doesn't matter that much because everybody on the team already knows what I can do, or I know I'm still gonna be playing X number of minutes, or I know I'm still a starter, or I know I'm still gonna be getting the ball out whether I practice hard or not. He didn't look at it like that. He didn't minimize the value or the meaning of practice. He looked at it and said, since this is practice, I'm going to use this to practice not only my physical skills, so scoring his points and playing defense and running the plays that the Chicago Bulls will run, but also I'm going to use this time to work on my mental game so I can practice how I want to approach the actual game. I'm going to practice that in practice. That's why it's called practice, right? Often in sports, at least, and I'll speak on this from personal experience, many athletes approach practice. Maybe you get the physical part right. I've got to practice hard. We got to run hard in these drills. We're going to work on running these plays. We're going to know what our defense is. This is what we're going to do in this situation. If the coach calls this set, then that means we need to do this thing, this thing, this thing. Most athletes, for the most part, understand the physical part of practice. But the mental part, from what I saw in my days playing and at every level, is that most athletes don't approach practices mentally the way they would the games. We approach practices kind of like with a little bit of a little more nonchalant attitude that it's just practice. Right? We don't need to go that hard in practice. Everyone remembers, any of you who follow sports, remember Allen Iverson's infamous practice press conference where he basically shitting on the whole concept of practice. Why do I need to go so hard in practice? How is practicing hard going to make my teammates better or make me better in any way? Look what I do in the games. I'm so great in the games. I don't need to practice hard that much. Now, maybe you consider that to be a reason why Allen Iverson didn't last as long as maybe some people thought he could have. Maybe you think Allen Iverson was absolutely right. Look, he was pretty damn good. He did make the Hall of Fame in basketball. And maybe you think because of that, you try to make sure that if a player hears that they understand that they probably don't have Allen Iverson's talent. So they shouldn't try to mimic what he did. Whatever you think of it, I want you to understand Michael Jordan's thought was different. His thought was, I want to make practice as hard as possible. I want to get into my right mental state during practice so that when I get in the game, it's less stressful to me than the practice was. And the whole point that I'm making here in point number one is that unlike Allen Iverson, my advice to you is to practice the mindset that you're going to bring to the game when you're in practice so that when you get in the game, it's easy. So when you get in the game, nothing is surprising you. So when you get in the game, there's no anxiety, there's no stress, there's no fear, there's no performance issues. You don't have any of that because everything that you need to do mentally, you've already done it so many times in practice when the lights were not on, that when you get in the game, it's easy to step right into that mode. So any of you players who have dealt with performance anxiety, you deal with feeling fearful, you deal with just being stressed out or your palms get sweaty or for whatever reason you believe you're not performing at the level you know you can when you get into the performance, that's because you're not practicing your mental game enough. You may be practicing the physical game great. This is something that basketball players say to me often. I practice and I do great. I practice or I play against my friends or I play with my team in practice and I do good, but then I get in the game and I don't do anything or I do a whole lot less than what I do when I'm in my practice mode or in a comfortable mode. That's because you are not activating the mental game side of practice. The physical game side of practice, I think, many athletes pretty much, I wouldn't say they all have it down because every athlete can still develop skills, but the resources for doing that, they're plentiful. I started putting basketball video online in 2006. I don't even put basketball and video online anymore, and it's not like the basketball world is just void of drill videos. And once I stopped, there are plenty of other people. There are 1,000 people uploading a video to YouTube right now of a basketball drill. I think that might be absolutely right. 1,000 people right now uploading a video of basketball to YouTube. So it's not like the drills and skills are that there's some void in it that nobody has any and nobody knows where to look or what to do. I think there's plenty of it out there. What many athletes don't have is the mental game side of things. What many athletes don't have is getting myself in the mental space in practice, in my training, in my individual workouts, in my meditation time. If you're even taking meditation time, you're not getting yourself in the mental game space then. So no wonder you get in the game and you don't know what to do. Because your mind and body are in two different places. Your body knows what to do because you've been practicing the skills and the dribbling and the shooting and running the plays all of these times. But then your mental game is like, wait a minute, you ain't tell us this was happening. You didn't tell us that this was coming. You weren't prepared for it. So your first step in working on your mental game is you need to take time out, whether that's during your training, during your practice, or outside of your training and practices. I would actually say end outside of your training and practices. So you're going to be doing both, where you get yourself in the mental space that you're going to want to be in when you get to the competition. And I have a workbook at hoophandbook.com that is called How to Play as Well as You Practice. And we address these issues of performance anxiety, getting your mind in the right space, preparing your mental game ahead of time. And it is written specifically for the basketball player, but any of you who's not a basketball player, I would encourage you to read it, and you will notice many of the similarities, many of the parallels for when I'm talking basketball. You can take it and just paste in whatever it is that you do, and the concepts will work perfectly for you as well. Any of you who's ever dealt with performance anxiety, anything you do when it's time for you to show your game. Point number 2. Today's topic is how to work on your mental game. Number 2 is envision yourself doing the job that you're prepping for. So the first step is getting yourself mentally, what's the state that you want to be when you walk into the room or walk onto the court? And number 2 is envision yourself actually doing the thing. The thing that you're going to do, see yourself doing it in your mind's eye. In sports, basically, where are you going to get the ball? What plays are your team going to run? How many strokes do you need to get to the end of the swimming pool? At work, how are you going to answer the questions that you know are coming from that prospect that you got to pitch to tomorrow? Shark Tank contestants, I told you the story. There were a couple guys who went on Shark Tank, and they ended up getting funded for their business. And someone asked them, hey, how did you prepare for stepping into the Shark Tank? Because thousands of people apply for Shark Tank, hundreds get actually to step into the tank, and only a few actually of their pitches actually come on TV. And of those few, only a handful of them even get funded by the Sharks. So how did you prepare yourselves for going on Shark Tank? They asked these guys whose business had just been funded by one of the Sharks. They said, we went and watched every episode that had ever come out of Shark Tank, and we wrote down every single question that had ever been asked, and we drilled ourselves to have answers, clear and direct and specific answers to every single question that any shark had ever asked in the history of the show. I'm telling you all that to tell you this, not that you need to go log every question that somebody might ask you, though it's not a bad idea. It's they envisioned themselves doing the job that they're preparing for. The job that they were preparing for was go on Shark Tank, present our business, get somebody to fund our business. That was the job that they were preparing for. How did they envision themselves doing that job? They actually practiced doing the job, which is what? The Sharks are going to ask us questions. They're going to ask us about this. They already knew everything the Sharks were going to ask us. All they had to do was look at what they've already asked. Past performance is the number one indicator of future performance. You want to know what somebody's going to do in the future, look what they've done in the past. Envision yourself doing the job that you're preparing for. So whatever you're going to be doing, if you're going to be shooting baskets, envision yourself shooting that shot from wherever you're normally getting the ball, from whatever you're going to be doing. This is why trainers in sports, especially in a sport like basketball, say to players, listen, practice game shots and practice at game speed, meaning practice the things that you're going to be asked to do in the game. May not be the same thing that this other guy's doing. May not be the same that her over here is doing. What are you going to be asked to do in the game? And how often are you practicing those things? Physically, I'm sure many athletes practice them all the time, but are you practicing them mentally? So when you're in practice, and this is why trainers say move at game speed, so you can get your mind, hopefully, get your mind up to speed with your body. Your body understands what moving at game speed means, but if your mind doesn't understand, then it doesn't unlock everything that your body can do. So this is how you can practice a whole lot. Then you get in the game, and because your mind's not in the right space, you're not doing all the stuff that you practice physically. You're like, well, I practiced so many times. How come physically it's not coming out? It's because your mind has it locked up. Your mind has a padlock on there, or your mind has a combination lock rather, and you don't know the numbers to the combination. You forgot the numbers to the combination because you haven't practiced opening that lock often enough. By the time you get into a live game performance athletes, you should be unlocking that combination lock with your eyes closed. That's a good metaphor right there. Where are you going to get the ball? What plays you going to run? How many strokes does it take for you to get to the end of the pool before you make your turn? How are you going to answer the questions that people are coming? Like I told you, the Shark Tank contestants, they practiced everything that was possibly going to happen. That's game speed practice, people. When I'm telling you those Shark Tanks guys did, they were practicing at game speed. This is exactly what's going to happen in the game. They knew everything that could possibly happen, every possible permutation that could take place in that game of stepping into the Shark Tank, they were ready for it. They prepared for every single one. They were over-prepared for the Shark Tank. Are you over-prepared mentally for anything that could possibly happen, everything that could possibly come up? Now, in sports, it may not be so finite. At least the Shark Tank guys, there was a point they got to the end of the list. Right, they wrote down every question that never been asked. At some point, they had every single question. So unless one of the sharks came up with a new question that hadn't been asked yet, they had everything. They had a finite list. Now in sports, you may not be able to make a finite list mentally of everything that could possibly take place. But the more you practice and the more you step into practice in the mindset of this is just like the game, of I'm going to prepare for this just like I prepared for the game, the more you do that, the much easier it will be when you get in the game, even if you see something brand new. Because in practice, you're going to see some things that are brand new. Point number 3. Today's topic is how to work on your mental game. Routinize your life and your work so that you are focused ahead of time. What I mean by routinize, that means do the same things the same way at the same time in the same place consistently. That's all I mean by routinize. Make routines out of what you're doing, at least around your game and around your life, especially those of you who are performers, because you have a whole lot of people watching you, and all of us are performing at some level for some audience. Routines create habit, ladies and gentlemen, and habits are automatic and unconscious things that we do. Meaning what? That means a habit is something you don't have to think about, you don't have to decide about, because you will be doing them automatically. You don't even have to think about them. You don't have to consider, hey, what about this? You're already doing it, and you don't even realize that you did it with your habits. And that stores, what it does is saves up your mental energy for when you really need it. For when you get into that live event, you may not need your mental energy at all. You can get into that zone space mentally that many athletes talk about getting into. You get into that zone when you don't have to think about anything, when you don't have to make any decisions, because you have already in your mind created routines and habits for everything that you're doing. The way that you get dressed, the way that you get on the court, the way that you do your warm-up, the way that you're thinking mentally. You see all these things that we've been talking about already, taking time out to clear your mind. Focus on where you're going to be in the moment. Envisioning yourself doing the things that you're preparing for. See, if you're doing these things ahead of time, by the time you get into the game situation, the performance situation, the routines take over immediately. They take over, habit takes over. You don't have to think about anything. You don't have to decide anything. Nothing that comes up is going to shake you out of your mindset or out of your routine, because mentally you are already locked in and focused. The more you do these things ahead of time, the less you'll have to think about them when it comes time to perform. You won't have to think about them at all if you create these routines, if you ingrain these habits. The way you create a habit is, first of all, creating a routine and doing the routine over and over again to the point that you don't even have to remember, oh yeah, this is the next step in the routine. You just do it. That's when you created the habit. They are automatic, they are unconscious, requires no thinking. You just do it without saying anything. The same way you can shoot a ball or dribble a ball or pass a ball without having to think about it now, because you've done it so many times, you can create a habit for the way you approach the game mentally. And again, I'll repeat those resources that I gave you once we get to the end of this episode about getting yourself in that space as quickly as possible, especially those of you who are performance artists like athletes, or you're in the entertainment arts, and anybody though. If you give a sales presentation to 3 people, that's a performance. You damn well better perform in front of those 3 people. If you want to make that sale, you want to get that commission, you want to pay your bills, you need to perform. Whether it's in front of 3 people or 30,000, there's a performance that all of us have to give at some point. And if you're working on your physical game, your resources game, you got to work on your mental game so you can unlock all the rooms in your physical game's house, so to speak, if you understand the metaphor. Let's recap today's topic, which is how to work on your mental game. Since I say the mental game is just as important as, if not more important than, the physical game, you need to know where to begin. This is how you begin. Follow these 3 steps. Number 1, take time out to clear your mind and focus on the way you would be feeling in the moment. And you don't even have to be a performer for this one. You can use this one outside of your performance, outside of your work. How are you going to feel 5 years from now when you're living the life that you want to live? When you create the business that you want to create, or you have the life or the relationships or the family that you want to have, how are you going to feel then? Take time out to have yourself feel the way that you're going to feel, then make yourself feel that way now. Any of you ever wonder if the law of attraction works? This is the law of attraction right here. If you may be questioning whether the law of attraction works, probably because you've never done this before. Now, if you do it on a consistent basis, you'll find out if it works because you'll be putting it into action. But if you haven't put it into action yet, you shouldn't be questioning it. Go do it and find out for yourself. If you're going to be playing a sport, where do you want to be mentally during that game? If you're speaking in public, how do you want to be when you're standing on that stage or doing that job interview or giving that sales presentation? You need time practicing that thing. The same way you practice what you're going to say, or the same way you practice how you're going to move about, the same way you practice what shots you're going to shoot, you need to practice how you're going to feel mentally. That matters, and it matters a lot. Point number 2, envision yourself doing the job that you're preparing for. So in sports, envision yourself where you're going to catch the ball and what moves you're going to do, or how you're going to set the screen, or the plays your team is going to run. You do this in practice. Your coach has you run through the plays and do these things and move to certain spots, so everybody knows exactly what to do when you get in a game situation. But what you need to do on top of that is you need to mentally get yourself in the frame of mind how you're going to be in the game. That means when you go through practice, don't go through it with this nonchalant attitude that it's only practice, quote unquote. You're not Allen Iverson. Go through practice as if it's a live game situation and how you approach it mentally. Because when you do that, by the time you get in the game, you have already made a routine and made a habit of how you're approaching things, and you don't have to figure it out when it comes game time, which leads us right into point number 3. Routinize your life and work so that you're focused ahead of time. Routines create habits. You create a routine for yourself consciously. You do it often enough consciously, it becomes a habit, unconscious and automatic, meaning you won't have to think about or decide about anything that's happening when you get to the performance part, because you're already doing it automatically, and nothing's going to break that habit when you get into the moment. Now, the resources that I referred to earlier, first of all, the Bulletproof Bundle. Those are my 4 best books on mental game. Well, before my book, Work on Your Game, came out, these 4, 100 Mental Game Best Practices, the Mental Handbook, the Mirror Motivation, and Super You. Those are all part of the Bulletproof Bundle at dreallday.com/BB for Bulletproof Bundle. At hoophandbook.com, we have a workbook called How to Play as Well as You Practice. Any of you athletes who have felt like you worked on your game a lot, you have the skills, but then you get in the game and you're not doing any of the stuff, that's because you haven't followed what I laid out in this workbook. But that's why I wrote this workbook, Playing as Well as You Practice, where we spend the majority of the time in that workbook focusing on the mental side of things, not the physical side of things. So that, again, is at hoophandbook.com. It's also on Amazon. We also have the audio version on Audible if you prefer. And let's talk about what's going on in the game group. Now, of course, in the game group, there is a basketball skill development section. So for you players who have had these issues with performance anxiety, we will be putting in the Playing as Well as You Practice video format of everything that's in that workbook. Is all on video as well. And of course, that's 100% me. That is going to be in the game group. If it's not there already, it will be there within the next, probably by the time you hear this, it's probably already in there. But if it's not, it will be in there soon. Of course, we have the forum where I'm answering questions, addressing issues, any challenges you have. You're a member of the game group. You can ask as many questions as you want. I'm addressing everything, giving you links, giving you detailed answers, may give a whole video or a whole article to answer a question that someone's asked if I haven't covered it before. And also in the game group, we have the business, personal development, and those of you who are looking to play professional basketball or further your professional basketball career, we're covering that. We're looking at exposure camps, breaking down what they're offering. I'm telling you my recommendations on whether you should attend the camp or not and why, going through their websites with a fine-tooth comb, telling you what I see, telling you what I don't see. These 4 areas, growth, business, skill development, professional career, all covered in the game group. The link to get all the information for what we offer there, what you get, is at dreallday.com/membership. Work on your game. Dre all day.